Hello and welcome to my video. With the Donny shirt and with every other top that I make, the first step is to do a broad back adjustment. Since the two back pieces of this particular pattern are split into two, the first thing that I did is make it one piece. I did this by folding both pieces at the seam allowance and then taping them together so that it would make one piece. After that, I measured out where the seam allowance was on the shoulder so that I could figure out where I needed to go vertically down from to make the cut on the broad back adjustment. And the instructions for this are linked in the bio of my Gilbert top video, which will be linked in the card above. But after making my vertical and horizontal lines, all I do is just cut it at those lines and then add 1/2 inch to the back, which is about the amount that I found's worked for me. The next step is to cut out your fabric. Since this is double gauze, I thought the best way to cut it out would be to use my roller cutter, since I didn't think this would pin very well and work well with the scissors. I also didn't iron this beforehand, I just lightly went over it with some steam, since I didn't want to press out any of the texture in this fabric. And of course, don't forget to cut out your interfacing. Or attach it. And for this I wasn't too worried about pressing out any of the texture, since everything that's being interfaced is going to be somewhat hidden in on the inside of the garment. And then we'll do some stay stitching around the collar and armholes of the tops, to make sure it doesn't stretch out. And then we get to move on to the collar. Prior to this, I already interfaced one of the collar halves, and then you pin them right sides together. Stitch around the straight edges of the collar. Trim the edges, and then turn it inside out and press. Next, I tackled the pocket. The first step of that is to do the top fold or edge of the pocket. There's 2 folds here, and then you end up turning it inside out after stitching up the sides. And you'll see that once you turn it inside out, it kind of naturally shows you where your side seams need to be pressed. And you just follow along with that seam allowance all the way around. And while I used an iron here, if you use double gauze like I did, I recommend just pressing it out with your fingers. It doesn't make the pocket lose its shape as much as the iron can, and for double gauze I think it does a perfectly fine job creating that crease. And then you just line your pocket up with the markings indicated on the pattern, and then you just stitch it in place. The next steps are all pretty straightforward. First, I finished the front edges of the 2 front panels, and then I sewed them to one of the top back panels. And then pressed my seams back. And then after that, I started to attach the collar. Matching up the collar to the shirt, It's just a matter of matching up notches to either seams or other notches. It's pretty straightforward, and once I had all of the pins in place, all I did was just stay stitch along that seam. The next few steps are where I think a lot of sewing gets kind of tedious for me, where it's just a lot of different steps all after each other. It'll be assembling the back and pressing the edges of the lining for the front. I think I just find this much task switching kind of exhausting. But at least once the back is fully assembled, the rest of it is all pretty straightforward, and then we get to do the fun part of the Burrito Method, which I think is my favorite part of the entire process. But first, I need to finish the front of the shirt. In order to do this, I stitch down the center seam, and then sew down the lining that goes around the front and collar of the shirt. Including at the shoulders. And also finish the lower back piece, which entails sewing gathering stitches between the two notches in the center back, matching it up with the upper back portion, and then sewing it together. And don't forget to remove all your gathering stitches afterwards. And now finally, we can do the Burrito Method, which I think just looks like magic. Next is the sleeves, which is a fairly standard woven top construction. First, the tops of the sleeves are gathered. Something that I always find helpful when doing the gathering on the top of the sleeve is to break up the gathering stitches instead of being one giant gathering stitch from notch center to notch, to break up each of those sides into two different lines of gathering. so that you can gather each half of the sleeve independently and not end up with bunching too much at the front or back of the sleeve. Then the notches are matched up between the shirt and the sleeve, and then they're sewed along the top. Something I always do with woven tops is sew down the finished seam allowance between the sleeve and the main body to the main body to make it a little bit less scratchy and more comfortable. And this is the stage where you want to go ahead and press your edge for the sleeve. I wanted the end of my sleeve to have a slightly rolled up look, so I went ahead and rolled in the other direction. The problem with this is that the finished seam would normally show on the outside of the shirt with this, so I explicitly changed which side of the fabric I was sewing on for the area that would make up the turned edge. And then after that, the side seams are sewn. I left out a large amount of finishing seams, but just assume I'm using my serger to finish all my seams once I'm done sewing them. And now the last step in this process, other than just ironing things nice and washing it, is doing the hemming. I already said earlier that I did the sleeves in a slightly off-pattern way, but the hemming I did on the bottom is fairly standard. And this is the finished look. I think this top is so comfortable. And I also made it in a sand-washed cotton and a cotton linen twill, and both were also amazing choices for this top. I think realistically any lightweight woven or even medium weight woven would be a great fit for this. If you actually watched all the way to the end, let me know what you think, or if you've ever made this top.